This video is brought to you by Brilliant. After a relatively positive first few months, South Africa's government of national unity is looking anything but united, with the parties fighting over land reform, education, health, and now taxes, forcing an unprecedented delay in delivering the country's national budget. So in this video, we're going to explain why the South African government is in something of a crisis, why it's a bad time for it, and whether the coalition can stay together. Explore which world leaders are winning and which are losing every week with our new podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard. Find it over on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. So let's quickly start with some context as to how and why South Africa's coalition government came about. The election in May last year saw the ruling African National Congress, or ANC, lose its majority for the first time in the 3 decades since the end of the apartheid regime. The left-of-centre ANC, which remained the largest party despite losing its majority, was therefore forced to go in search of partners to bring into government. It eventually struck an agreement with the main opposition party, the market-friendly centre-right Democratic Alliance, or DA, which was unprecedented given the ANC and DA have been rivals for decades. They agreed, along with other smaller parties, to form a so-called Government of National Unity, GNU, which eventually grew to feature a total of 10 wide-ranging parties, although it is dominated by the ANC and DA, which together make up 85% of the government's parliamentary seats. So with that background out of the way, why is the government struggling? South Africa's finance minister was due to deliver the national budget on the 19th of February. However, after an emergency cabinet meeting, the budget speech was delayed last minute and postponed until March the 12th. This was the first time that a budget had been delayed in the post-apartheid era and left the country in uncertainty over the government's economic plans. The point of contention was the ANC's plan to increase VAT by 2 points from 15% to 17%, a move that was opposed by the DA and other coalition parties. For some context, South Africa continues to struggle with weak economic growth, a rising debt burden of around 75% of GDP, high debt servicing costs, and persistent inequality and unemployment. In short, the government needs to raise money to plug a revenue shortfall and to fund its spending priorities, which includes an important shift to renewable energy that could help end the problem of rolling blackouts that started to rear its head again. The proposed increase in VAT, already the second biggest contributor to South Africa's tax revenue, was expected to raise 58 billion rand, or $3.1 billion, for the coming 2025-26 financial year. The logic in targeting VAT is that it has a broader base than other taxes, it's easier to collect, and according to the Treasury, would have the least detrimental effect on economic growth and employment over the medium term relative to increases in personal or corporate income taxes. However, the problem with raising VAT is that, because it's a flat consumption tax on goods and services, it generally affects poorer households more, as they spend a greater proportion of their income on things like food, water, and electricity. The proposal has left the ANC under fire from basically all sides. Their main coalition partner, the DA, expressed its resolute opposition to a VAT hike at a time when millions of South Africans are already suffering under a cost of living crisis, calling instead for expenditure cuts. Other smaller parties in the coalition also opposed the move, as did the far-left opposition Economic Freedom Fighters, or EFF, who called for the introduction of a property wealth tax and an increase in corporation tax instead. With the budget postponed by 3 weeks, the governing parties will have to reach an agreement on a new budget that will presumably raise money from some other source. As South Africa's finance minister said, it is not simply a rift over a 2-point VAT rise, but rather that the parties are grappling with a broader debate over whether to borrow, cut expenditure, or raise tax to fund their priorities. This is a big question, but unfortunately it's far from the only thing causing trouble for the government right now. South Africa has also been the focus of economic and diplomatic fire from the Trump administration, which has moved to cut all US funding to South Africa, citing opposition to the South African government's land reform policies and its bringing of a genocide case against Israel to the International Court of Justice. This has left hundreds of millions of dollars in limbo, and there are even fears that the Trump administration could seek to scrap the preferential access to the US market that South Africa currently enjoys through the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which could threaten billions of dollars in trade and thousands of jobs. The Trump administration is also undertaking a sort of diplomatic boycott of South Africa, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio refusing to attend last week's G20 foreign ministers meeting in Johannesburg. Now, the land reform that Trump has railed against is also another key point of contention within South Africa's governing coalition, with the ANC supporting it and the DA opposing it. In brief, the recently signed law would allow the government to expropriate land without compensation in limited cases. The DA argues that this violates private property rights and has filed a legal challenge against it, calling it unconstitutional. Although it's worth pointing out that the DA's leader, despite his opposition to the law, clarified that Trump's dramatic claims about it were, quote, not true. The dispute over land reform is just one of a number of ideological divisions within the government, with the DA also opposing the ANC's education and health policies. So, with so many areas of disagreement, to the point that the DA has launched a legal challenge over land reform, at face value it must look like the government of national unity is on the verge of collapse under its own contradictions. But perhaps surprisingly, this is not necessarily the case. The DA, nor any of the other parties, haven't got to the point that they are threatening to walk out and collapse the government. For the DA, leaving the government would really need to be an action of last resort, as it would risk the ANC then seeking support from the more radical parties to their left, the EFF and MK, for example, something that the market and business-friendly DA has dubbed a doomsday coalition. However, that doesn't mean that the government can just continue as normal. The disputes are not just about substance, but also process, with the ANC accused of ignoring its coalition partner, the DA, and going over its head. With its honeymoon period well behind it, the government needs to recalibrate and actually act like a coalition if it is to tackle the significant domestic and international challenges that it faces. Now, the thing is, often in politics, we need to understand a wide variety of topics to truly understand what's going on. Unfortunately, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, helps us do just that, with thousands of lessons in maths, science, programming, and AI. And not only that, but their interactive lessons teach you by doing, instead of just asking you to mindlessly memorize stuff. This helps you build your critical thinking skills and to become a better thinker. For instance, Brilliant's newly updated maths courses help you establish a strong foundation in algebra. It then helps you build on this, teaching you how to conquer calculus, all while maintaining an emphasis on problem solving and reasoning. The thing I like best about this, though, is that their mathematical courses help you develop your mathematical intuition and fluency, skills that you can use in the real world. As we've told you before, data skills are absolutely necessary for navigating the modern world, and Brilliant is the best way to get them. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/TLDR or click on the link in the description. And by doing so, you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.